Well, hi guys, welcome to another Flight Deck 2 Sim live stream. I hope you can all hear me loud and clearly. Please let me know if you're having any issues with the audio. I do have the message screen open on another monitor. Today we're going to do a flight in the latest version of the ZIBO mod. It's in fact a pre-release version. It's something called 3.29 Delta Beta 7, so it's very similar to the one that's available now. And we're just going to go do the flight to Corfu, live weather, live time, following real-world operating procedures as we always do. So here we are in Malta. We are on stand 4. We're going to have a self-positioning start. There's no requirement for a pushback, so we're going to turn in this direction and then taxi to the holding point here, and actually going to do an intersection takeoff for runway 13. But we'll step through all of the information before we get going. So here we are in the flight deck. The aircraft is fully set up and ready to go, and what I'm going to do is bring up the navigational chart from Navigraph. Now here you can see Italy, the island of Sicily, and here's Malta down here in Lucca Airport. In fact, it's the only international airport on the island. The routing, Sid's going to take us southeast, turning northbound, and then we're going to be travelling northeast, just south of Sicily, south of Italy. This is called the Ionian Sea, I think that's correctly pronounced, and here's Corfu in Greece here. The flight time's going to be around 1 hour and 5 minutes, so we'll have plenty of time to answer any questions you might have about flying the 737. Let's have a look at the departure we're going to be flying. Go to View Charts, close this box here, and hopefully I should all have pre-saved them. Here they are on this side there. So we'll just bring up the airport terminal chart. Here you can see stand 4, and as I said, we're going to be pushing back. I'm going to turn on the flight tracker, and we're going to be not pushing back. We're going to taxi to this whole point here, Foxtrot. I'm actually going to do an intersection takeoff from here and take off like that. So we've got plenty of runway available here. It's a very long runway in Malta, and the standard instrument departure, that's going to take us here 1.6 miles, turning south and then a left turn, climbing initially to 5,000 feet and then onwards towards Lored, and then we'll talk about the arrival into Corfu, which is quite a challenging airport to fly into. So we'll get rid of the charts and I'll jump into the flight deck. Now everything's all set up and ready to go, as I already said. For those of you who don't have the latest version of the mod, here you have the EFB available. Now, just before I disconnect the GPU, I need to start the APU, and whilst that's going on, I'll try and answer some questions. Oliver Davison, what is the isolation valve? Well, isolation valve on the overhead panel. Well, this is the air conditioning system, and the isolation valve, as the name states, it isolates the two bleed systems. We have engine bleed number 1 and 2, and if we have a problem with, say, the bleed or the pack, we can close the valve and then just isolate that side and just use one side to pressurise and provide air conditioning for the aircraft. If you have the isolation valve in auto, it stays closed if the engine bleed and pack switches are on auto or higher on, but if you ever turn a pack or bleed switch to the opposition, it automatically closes. But you can find more information about that in FCOM 2. Here's the APU starting. Oops, accidentally turned the wiper on. Not a good idea when the windscreen is dry. Looks like you can all hear me absolutely fine. For those of you who've watched my streams before, I'm using some new software called Streamlabs OBS. I've been testing it and it hasn't crashed once. As you've seen in my previous live streams, I've always had a couple of crashes, so hopefully we won't have any issues today. Now, APU's there, we'd usually wait a minute. We'll put the APU bleed on now to start the engines and reset the master caution for dual bleed. Now imagine we get the clearance for the engine start, no pushback required here, so it'll be Lucca Tower, flight deck sim, request engine start. Engine start is approved, and parking brakes set, put the air conditioning packs off, anti-collision light on, and the transponder to out off. Right, let's now get the engine started, and I will get back to some of your questions into the flight. So start switch to ground, N2 is increasing, and we all love an external view as the engine starts. Ghost Maneski, please show us what you could do on that tablet. Yeah, I'll show you some of the features as we get on our way to Corfu. There we go. N2 25%, start lever to idle detent. Very hard to check the spar valve, goes from dim to brighten off, but EGT is increasing. Fuel flow increasing, 56% N2. Start to cut out. On to number 2. N1's increasing slowly to 20%. EGT is good, N2 fuel flow is good as well. Number 2 stable. Start engine number 1. There's N2 again. So yeah, it's very simple to start the engine. Has anyone seen on the news about that Dash 8 that was stolen from Seattle? That was really interesting. I'll talk about that in the flight over. That guy must have had some experience of how to fly an aeroplane. Interesting story, that one. 25% N2. That reminds me, better make sure the flight deck door's closed. Yeah, that's it. Don't want anyone entering. Excellent. EGT increasing. N2's looking good. 56% N2. And there's the starter cut out, and we've got 2 good engine starts, all looking good. Now, just before we do anything, we just put the generator on the bus and the APU off, and now I need to get rid of the ground power, so that's under ground services, disconnect GPU. We've got better pushback plugin on the EFB now as well, so you can use that if you needed a pushback. We'll talk about some of the features later. So 2 good engine starts, no pushback required. We'd wait until the headset's been seen, and we can then do the before taxi flow. So generators on, APU off, start switch is continuous, probes on, packs in auto, isolation valve auto, APU bleed off, and all set. Flaps going to be flap 5 takeoff, already done the performance, full 22k, stab trim set, start levers idle detent. So let's now do the flight controls. Full forward, full back, full left centre, full right centre, and full left rudder and full right rudder. Blank the lower DU, push recall, and you then do the before taxi checklist. And you'll be pleased to know ZIBO now has all the checklists available on his EFB. He has helped design one. I've given him some feedback based on our checklist, so you can actually, if you want in real life, follow all of this as I've just done and then tick each one as we go along. Now, what I did there is exactly what we do in real life. We do the flow first, and then you'd flick through this checklist, making sure everything's done, and then you do the before taxi checklist read by pilot monitoring. But in this case, it's complete. So you can use all of that. You've got all the procedures there. You've got how to do go-arounds, non-precision approach. All that's been pretty much written by ZIBO. So he's with a bit of feedback from his testers like me and other 737 pilots. It's getting better and better every single day. We'll get taxiing. Any questions here I'd like to answer? A few answering there. We'll talk about some things. What's RNAV? I'll talk about that in the cruise. I'll have a look there. Good, not to worry. Right, let's get going. So, release parking brake, clear left, clear right, and when you are manoeuvring, I've actually flown to Malta a few times. When you're moving away from the stand like this, you really want to use minimum thrust, because along all here you're going to have all the baggage equipment, all the ground equipment, maybe some people standing around, and you definitely don't want to blow them over. So the first officer would very much be looking outside to make sure we're all clear, not getting anywhere near the terminal. So you can see here, you'd probably have someone here by the terminal would give you a thumbs up to tell you that your wingtip's all clear in the terminal, but that's how that's done in real life. I'm going to just turn the lights on for taxi as well. Good. So we'll just get clear of the apron, and then we'll do the before takeoff checklist. And maximum taxi speed whilst on the apron is 15 knots. That might be company specific, but it's certainly what we use here. Good. Right, so now we're clear of the apron, we can do the before takeoff checklist. That's actually on the control column here. So config I forgot to do, so we just quickly advance the thrust levers to make sure the takeoff warning horn doesn't sound. Flaps, we have 5 for takeoff. Stab trim set for takeoff. The takeoff briefing we can now review. So packs are in auto, bleeds are on, the V-speeds are set for takeoff. V1 138, VR 138, and V2 144 set. The departure is the Laurent 2 Bravo which is going to be straight ahead, 1.7 miles, DME distance, which should be here. Shall I go to index, approach, glide slope on? There you go, I've got the DME distance here. So 1.7 miles DME. We'll make a right turn track 180, and then when we're 4 miles, we'll make a left turn track 360, climbing to 5,000 feet, and then we'll intercept the 065 radial from Lukavir, which we'll go overview just before we take off there if you've got the Navichart subscription, but I'll overlay it a few times on the departure. So takeoff briefing is reviewed. Cabin, we'd push this, and they would come back to us to tell us the cabin's secure. We move the no smoking switch to on, and the before takeoff checklist is complete. Very good. George Carney, does the first officer have a tiller besides the captain? Well, he does in the ZIBO mod, but actually for the airline I work for, we don't have a tiller there at all. Captain is the only one who can taxi the aircraft. We just take control on the runway if you happen to be in the right hand seat for takeoff, and you can still use the rudder as I'm doing now to steer the aircraft. There is some limited nose wheel steering available. So when we line up, you see on the ND we're going to have to do a 180-degree turn, so we're going to line up and then just swing it round on the runway. It's very easy to do that on a 45-metre wide runway. In fact, in Malta I think it could be 60 metres wide, I don't know off the top of my head. Cool, so approaching holding point Foxtrot, we'd now contact tower and confirm we're ready for departure, and we'll imagine they've cleared us to line up and wait via Foxtrot for runway 13. So all the lights can go on. As we've not been cleared for takeoff, we'll just put this to here to remind us. Confirm with the other pilot we've been cleared to line up and wait, which we have been. So let's do the flow. MCP is set. Transponder to TARA, T-A-R-A. Strobe lights are on, and holding on the landing lights. Captain can turn the weather radar on as well. So when you line up like this, we're going to be taking off in this direction. We want to use as much runway as possible, so we don't actually follow the yellow line. That's kind of when you're vacating or on the taxiway. So we're going to, you know, there's always a famous saying in aviation, the three things that are useless to you: runway behind you, air above you, and fuel in the Bowser. So the same applies really here. We've done the performance from intersection here, so we want to use as much as that of that runway as possible. So now we'll make the turn, just tapping the brake so we don't overshoot. There we go. And that's pretty much how you line up if you're doing an intersection takeoff where you have to turn more than 90 degrees. Awesome. And we've still got a good, I think there's 2,400 metres available here from this intersection, so there's plenty of runway available. Alright, so just before we get going, wouldn't usually set the parking brake on the runway, we just hold it on the foot brakes, but we'll just overview the departure again to make sure you're all happy where we are going. So here's the SID. Unfortunately, this chart doesn't have the moving maps feature. As I said, we're going to climb straight ahead, 1.6 miles, slight right turn to track 180 until we're 4 miles away. We then make a left turn 360 track, and we're going to intercept the 065 radial from the Gozo VOR towards Lored. So that's the departure, and you can see here I've got the VOR 1097 tuned and the radial 065 for raw data. So nothing stopping us from going. Any questions when we get going? Well, I'll have a look at these when we get to tougher climbs. We'll have a little bit of time available before we do that. I've got a weird ding going on in my headset. I think that means I've got a new subscriber or something, so welcome. Thank you very much for the subscription. That is always appreciated. Cool, so we've been cleared takeoff, and just looking at the latest weather, it is 230 at 8 knots, and the QNH is 1018. So crosswind, actually it's a bit of a slight tailwind actually from the right hand side coming there, so we'll need to use a little bit of left rudder to maintain centre line. Right, let's start the timing and get going. Release the parking brake, thrust levers up to 40% in 1. That's it, engines are stabilised, we'll push toga, set takeoff thrusts. Light forward pressure on the control column, 93.5%, so I'll take our thrust setting. Takeoff thrust set. Now indications normal. Using rudder to maintain centre line.
80 knots.
That's checked. Releasing the forward pressure on the control column. Just maintaining centre line with rudder. Hand off the thrust lever and rotate. Nice smooth rotation. There's a dead band. And 15 degrees. Positive rate of climb, gear up. And now we're just trimming it out to follow the flight directives. All these dings going off, thank you very much for the subscriptions. 400 feet, we just verify LNAV. For some reason it's still armed and not engaged. Not to worry. Right, just going to get the autopilot in here.
1000.
Command A. We've lost LNAV, so I'm just going to turn right manually to track 180. Did have some problems with this SID before. We could do this manually, and all we have to then do is wait until we're 4 miles away and then make the left turn as per the SID. So not sure why I've lost LNAV there. Okay, we can now bug up. Intercept, interesting. Insufficient fuel as well, apparently. So that's why ZIBO mod is still being tested. There's lots of little things that need work on, but it's a bit of my experience to get us going. So there's 4 miles. We can now make the turn to 360 and start retracting the flaps. There's flap 1. And flaps up. And if we just have a look at the chart briefly, you can see what I'm doing here. I haven't got the overlay, but we're just going to track 130 and I'll build a radial towards Lorette to intercept that manually, so we are following the SID accurately. These things actually do happen in real life. I've actually had an FMC failure after departure, and we had to fly just like we're doing now conventionally. Good, flaps up, no lights. We'll select vertical speed so we can anticipate the level off at the stop altitude of 5,000 feet. So we can now do the after takeoff checklist. So gear up and off, auto brakes off, and let's go to auto. Retracts off, taxi light off, air conditioning and pressurization, differential pressure 1 psi, and that's all set. And QNH set, passing 4,200 for altitude, 5,000 feet after takeoff. Checklist is complete. So it looks like the SID's a little bit broken, but not to worry. What we'll do, we'll build this here. If I bring up the chart, I'll show you what we're going to do. I'm going to carry on. Oh, I forgot to take the chart off initially, so sorry about that. Going to build this radial from 065, so the reciprocal of that would be 245 towards Lorette. So what I'm going to do is manually build this SID. So if I go Lorette, bring that to at the top, and we'll put 265 here. Oh no, 0. Oh, my maths has gone all funny today. 065, sorry. It should execute. Should have built this magenta line. There you go. So you see how I've got this magenta line here? I've just basically manually built the SID so we can use LNAV as we approach it to re-intercept the departure. So I hope that all kind of makes sense for you. Now, we'll imagine we've been cleared to a higher flight level. Luca Towers handed us over to Luca Radar, which is the ATC service in Malta. We've been cleared to climb. Let's make it a flight level 240 or something like that. And that is now set. 240 checked. We can now engage VNAV, push out into vent, and that deletes the restriction in the FMC. No longer restricted to 220 knots. And we can now set standard, and passing now flight level 49 for flight level 240. That's it. Now, all we've got to do then is re-engage LNAV as we approach this, and we're exactly flying the SID as depicted on the chart. Actually, if I engage LNAV now, yeah, it should work actually. I've armed LNAV, so it should automatically intercept the magenta line just as it would do in real life. So, here we go, up and away. We can release the cabin crew. They can go start serving coffee and croissants. Cool, right, let's have a look at some of these questions just before we approach flight level 100. Canada 1 pilots, how would you say the actual physics of the ZIBO compared to real life? Well, as I've said in a lot of my tutorials, we've got Twerkster, who's a member of the team here, who's got a lot of flying experience, far more than I have. He's helping developing the flight model based on feedback from myself, other 737 pilots. I personally think it's the best handling aircraft I've ever flown in a desktop simulator. Now, I'm not saying that because I'm supporting the mod. It is my genuine feeling, you know, when I compare this to the proper level D multi-million pound simulator and my experience flying the aircraft. The inputs I make on the controls are similar to what I do in real life. Still a lot of work to be done. It is a little bit sketchy in crosswind conditions, but that's, from what I understand, very hard to program. I have no experience on programming. I'm just a pilot with a little bit of flight sim experience, so I just fly in and give feedback. Good, so we'll monitor RNAV, make sure it intercepts the magenta line towards Lorette. What other questions do we have here? Skyfall Original, hey there, real pilot, normally flies 767, off at the moment with cancer. I wanted to say thank you for the great content. Well, thank you very much, Skyfall Original. Wish you a speedy recovery as you do, and hope you hopefully get flying, back flying soon as possible. So, passing flight level 100-240, can do the pre-cruise checks. All the lights can come off. APU's off, pressurization 2.5 psi, climbing to 320. Temperatures in the cabin are fine, it's set, and we can release the passengers as well, and just do a recall, make sure nothing's wrong, and the pre-cruise checks are complete. GPW's killer, do you not reset the barrier when you are over M3? Yeah, you can actually, that's a good point. I'll keep moving this. Yes, this was the minimum flat retraction altitude. I can actually get rid of this now by pushing RST, and then we'll use that later to set the minimums. SAR 156 can with you Navigraph charts and tablet, not at the moment, but that would be an awesome feature if we can get Navigraph charts on here and use that there. But we'll go through some of the features. At the moment, most of the features here have just been moved from the FMS, but you've got all the checklists available, and as you fly along, you can move the chart along, complete any checklists, and continue from there. Right, there we go. Aircraft's now intercepting LNAV. Put the iPad back in its holder, which is where it should be in all critical phases of flight. And now we're flying inbound to Lorette. And we can now tune the GOZO VOR on 5.7, and you'll see if I select VOR here, there we go, we've intercepted the radial quite nicely. So if we'd lost the FMC, we've got everything set up for raw data backup. We're flying outbound on the 065 radial at 065, so that's what we do in real life. Good. Yeah, keep those messages coming, absolutely loads coming in. Dan Cast, you said a few minutes ago, is this weather stock? Yeah, this is just stock X-Plane 11. The only add-ons I've got running right now are ZIBO mod, I've got the better pushback, the terrain radar, it's all stock. Nothing I've changed. I might add some more features in the future. But we're going to Corfu, and I do have the Fly Tampa Corfu scenery, which does look absolutely spectacular, and it's going to be quite an interesting approach into there today because there's no ILS at Corfu, it's all non-precision approaches. Daniel Nicholas, so with the auto seatbelt sign, what systems are in place and what restrictions are set for it to automatically change? So yeah, we leave it in the auto position, and if you put the gear off flat down at any point, it automatically moves the seatbelt on. We just have to remember to select it on in the descent as we pass below flight level 150, or of course if there's any turbulence. So for any of you in Malta, on the south of Italy, I hope you're getting a nice weather day like this. It was 32 degrees in Malta, and I think it's the same temperature in Corfu, so still very hot in the south of Europe. You can just about see the island of Sicily, and you've got an active volcano on Sicily, Mount Etna, which can sometimes erupt and cause problems if you don't want to be flying anywhere near a volcano in a commercial aircraft. Fly Matrix, thank you for these great tutorials, you are most welcome. What are the rules for determining the maximum bank angle by different flight levels? So this could be airline specific, but our angular bank selector, we've got it set to 25 degrees, which we have set all the time below flight level 300. Sorry. When we're above flight level 300, we move that to 10 degrees angular bank, just to ensure that when we're in heading select, we don't exceed that, because you can have issues at high altitude. As the airspeed increases, you've got things called coughing corner, buffeting can occur at low speed and high speed. Now LNAV has angular bank protection in it, so it'll still set an angular bank to ensure that none of those limits are exceeded. Ghostman SK, why do you need to tune the GOES OVR? Well, I don't need to, but it's nice to have it as a backup, so you know, if we lose the FMC, we still have the VOR tuned, and you can see we're pretty much bang on the radial there, so we have it available for raw data backup. Good. What have we got at the moment? 251 people watching, incredible. Thank you for taking your time out of your weekend to come and watch my live stream. I am planning on saving this so you can view it in the future. So, climb flight level 240, let's imagine we're cleared to our highest cruise level, our cruise level today, which is flight level 320, and that's set twice on the MCP and also on the FMC 3 times, and we're monitoring the distress frequency 1 to 1.5. Can't select it yet on the mod. So yeah, hopefully sometime in the future we'll do a live stream on VATSIM or something, so we can have a look at ATC communication. I did have a flight on VATSIM when I was still using FSX about a year ago, but I haven't used it since. It was pretty good. It was a little bit different to how it's done in real life, but yeah, it was an overall good experience, so I'll fire it up again for X-Plane 11. I'll do some trial flights, and we'll do either a tutorial and a live stream again using this. So S1 UK, hi all, watching from Heathrow Airfield Ops. Well, cool, thank you very much. Don't have to say I've never flown into Heathrow. That's an airport avoided by a low-cost operator who I work for. Julian Tech, anyone here have an opinion getting your PPL young, think of getting it now before going to uni? Well, I actually started gliding first. Started gliding when I was 15, flew solo on my 16th birthday. I then worked in a supermarket to self-fund my private pilot's license, and I got that when I was 19. I was going to go to university, but I ended up not going, just went straight to flight training school, took a loan out, and I was just fortunate enough to get straight into a job. So yeah, there's lots of really good advice out there. There's some really good YouTube channels. You can always send me a message if I'm free. I try to answer as many messages as possible. Good. So there we go, there's the island of Sicily. I don't want to jinx it, but the streaming software seems to be holding on quite nicely. So here's the charts again. Bring up the en route chart so you can see how we're progressing. We won't need Malta anymore. Here we go. So we're just flying towards Lored, which is the termination for the SIDS, and then here's Sicily, here's the Ionian Sea, and as we get to Corfu, Idimi, the star's going to take us northbound, eastbound, and then towards the Kira VOR, and then we'll be landing, or planning to land, runway 35 in Corfu. All the approaches onto runway 17, they're circle to land, and very complex arrivals as well, but it is definitely forecasting runway 35. I think it will be really cool to do a tutorial for the circle to land into Corfu. So we'll keep an eye on our progress throughout the flights, and then we'll set up for the departure a few minutes after we reach top of climb. Hello Sam the Ryanair man, I've seen you comment a few times in my videos. Do the pilots fill out the load sheet or a dispatcher? Which bits does the dispatcher do and which do the pilots do? Do you do the allowed traffic load calculation, for example? So very much airline specific. Some airlines, well, I say most airlines, they'd have a dispatcher complete the load sheet, then the captain needs to check the weight of performance, the figures, make sure everything's in balance, we haven't exceeded any maximum weights, and then with the first officer they together calculate the takeoff performance. But the dispatcher makes the load sheet, captain checks it, but things like allowable traffic weights, the distribution of passengers, it's usually calculated by the dispatcher, but we are trained to do it in case dispatcher isn't available. Okay, so approaching the cleared level, so we'll just reduce our rate of climb, so vertical speed 1,000 feet per minute. And so our cruise speed today, 0.781. So ZIBO's mod, he's working very hard getting the FMC working absolutely correctly. It is very, very good as it is now for something that's completely free. And we've actually now got the correct descent speeds based on cost index, but the cruise speed it's pretty much always going to be the same in the mod at the moment because we haven't got the data on the information. I've actually contacted Boeing directly for a channel at work to see if they could actually get us that data for the FMS. Here we go, approaching flight level 320, out acquire, we can re-engage VNAV, FMC speed VNAV path, and that, guys, is what I stare at for most of my career in the cruise. FMC speed LNAV VNAV path, so it's worthwhile once you get to top of climb, just make sure LNAV VNAV's engaged, check the pressurisation, 6 psi, cabin altitude around 8,000 feet, and we're all good. It's just a little bit of light turbulence around, but nothing too bad. And I'm guessing that is Mount Etna on Sicily to the left hand side. And that's it, on our way now to Corfu. Time is 14:03 Zulu live time, and our top of descent, that's 26, so 23 minutes from now we'll be initiating our descent. Fly half 2, do you use a fixed cost index? Yes, in my airline we use a fixed cost index. Today we are using cost index, I think it was 30, I can't remember what I selected off the top of my head. Performance, yes, cost index 30, which gives us a descent speed of around 275 knots or so. So good. Alright, so let's have a look at some of the features with the newest version of the the newest version of the ZIBO mod. So I get a lot of messages every day on Facebook and Instagram, people asking me about this. So this is a pre-release version of the mod. ZIBO is incredibly good at updating it. It sometimes gives us 2 or 3 updates a day to test, and if I get any free time I can test them straight away. And the most common new features we have is the electronic flight back, so you've got PAs available to increase the realism. I'm going to be doing some recordings for AudioBird XP soon, so you can hear my voice if you want to hear it anymore for some of the PAs. You've got other things such as catering, fuel weight and balance, and this is really important prior to the flight that you make sure you set this up correctly. And for those of you who watch my videos, you'll notice I use SimBrief because they have an operational flight plan format called Lido, which is absolutely identical to the format we use. And actually another tutorial I'm doing very soon is going to be covering some of the features regarding how to use the operational flight plan, how to do fuel checks, etc. So that's the current payload on board. That's based on 150 passengers, a little bit of cargo. That's the current fuel we have on board for the flight. I don't fiddle too much with the centre of gravity, I just leave it set for default settings. A feature which I actually requested ZIBO did and he's brought back was aircraft config. It's actually the sync pilot feature, so if you set anything here, look, if I preset the QNH here, it changes it to on the first officer side. Not realistic, but certainly if you're flying single pilots, it makes it so much easier. You don't then have to independently set the stuff on the first officer side. So it can actually, if I just get my phone, we can just actually preset the QNH in Corfu based on the existing weather conditions. So Corfu QNH at the moment is 1014, so there we go, we've already preset that for our descent. I'm getting lots of dings here. Now, I only have one monitor, so it says, "That's the Joe, just subscribe, thank you very much." I've been watching some live streams, and I understand that's what you have to do. Someone subscribes, you have to immediately say thanks, which I'm going to get a second monitor so I can look at this separately. So, yeah, thank you very much for the subscription. Right, what other questions have we had here? What's the worst weather turbulence you've experienced? How scary is it when you go through it for the first time? Also, have you had an emergency? Yeah, I've had... Turbulence is just one of those things, really. No one likes it. It just increases our workload. Light turbulence is fine. I would say I've never had severe turbulence. Severe turbulence is often misinterpreted, I think, by most line pilots. Severe turbulence is, you know, temporary loss of control of the aircraft, unable to maintain altitude. But never had anything that bad. I've definitely had moderate, but it's something you deal with. Put the seatbelt signs on. If it's consistently bad, we'll descend or climb to get out of it. But it's just something you deal with. Just put the seatbelt on, tighten it up, and just ride it out. But the airplanes, unless you fly through the biggest thunderstorm or a hurricane or a tornado, it's not going to fall apart. They're incredibly strong and robust in those conditions. Oh, hi Michael Fogelman. For me, 2 monitors are a must. Yeah, I think I definitely need to get a second monitor. For any of you watching, Michael Fogelman is the guy who actually designed the paint scheme on my mod. He did it very kindly for free, so big massive thanks to Michael there. Thank you very much. Good. So actually, probably should talk about the approach into Corfu soon. Got a little... So you have a little weather radar return here. It's only a little bit of green, but I don't know if that's some weather there. But I didn't think it actually depicted it correctly, but this is just the default mod. Anyway, let's have a look at the approach into Corfu today. So if I bring up the charts again. Right, so here we are on our way to Corfu over the Ionian Sea. And if I select this, we'll view the charts in Corfu. And here we go, you can see all the charts I've pre-selected available here. So let's talk about the arrival first. Unfortunately, this chart also isn't suitable for moving maps, so we'll just have to carefully monitor our progress. But we're going to fly to Idami initially, towards the Kakira VOR, and then when we're 25 miles away from Kakira, we make a left turn and we'll fly the 23-mile arc from the VOR. The mod does this beautifully. It works well. It just obviously doesn't depict it on the magenta line yet. And then when we get to the 251 radial, we'll make a right turn towards Bedix, which is the initial approach fix for a lot of the approaches into Corfu. The approach we're flying today is the RNAV approach for runway 35. Now, from Bedix, we're going to fly to these waypoints here, intercept the approach, but you'll notice with the descent restrictions that they're really important that you follow these accurately, otherwise you're going to get very close to obstacles and terrain on the arrival. So it's important that you step down based on these altitudes on the chart. Now, the most important thing to note then is the terrain. You see to the northeast, high terrain, 8,200 feet, and there's a tiny bit of text here. You can see here, step 2, final approach track offset 5 degrees. So when we come on final approach, we won't be perfectly aligned with the runway. We'll have to disconnect and then fly manually to line up that way. So that's how that has to be done. Otherwise, it's a very much put the information in the FMC, use LNAV and VNAV, and follow the guidance in. The minimum's 770 feet. We add 40 feet to this because it's a non-precision approach. That allows for the fact that we can disconnect, or if we decide to go around at minimums, we never get below this height. So the actual minimums we'll set today is 810 feet. That's about it really. Runway's quite short. Runway 35, 2,314 metres available beyond the threshold. So we're going to definitely use flat 40. If we stop in time, we'll vacate at Charlie. If not, we can vacate at Bravo Alpha. It's a very simple apron. We're going to taxi and we'll just pick one of the stands here. Well, might as well go for stand 5, which is where I did my cold and dark tutorial from. Oh, getting all of it flustered. Excellent, so that's the arrival approach. Now let's just make sure everything's loaded correctly in the FMC. So if I bring up Explain 11 again, here's the FMS descent page, 250 below 100 knots. I've pre-populated all of this information from the operational flight plan I've used from SimBrief. That's the forecast QNH, ISA deviation. We need to put the fix rings in to guide us and help us as to when to configure on the approach. So we'll use a 10-mile ring to select no later to select flat 1, and then we'll plan to configure, well, we usually configure at 4 miles, but because it's quite a complex approach, I want to get configured a little bit earlier, no later than 5 miles. I might configure a little bit sooner, gear down flat 15. Now we step through the FMC, checking it against the operational flight plan, making sure it's all correct. And you can see here, there's the IDEMI point, and I just want to show you a neat little feature. Mind you, you already might know this, but you see how it says Delta 266 Yankee? Well, Yankee is the 25th letter of the alphabet. There's Yankee, and if I bring up the chart again on OBS, select the star, you can see here 25 miles. So you know this is the waypoint, Yankee 25 miles. That's where we're going to do the left turn. So that's how that works in the FMC. So we step through it, making sure we can identify all the waypoints. There's the intercept for the 23-mile arc. There's the whiskey point. Bed X is the initial approach fix. Then we're going to start slowing down. There's the decel point. Try to be 185 knots, which is the speed restriction for the turn on final. And you can see how it's offset. This white dashed line is the extended centre line, and the magenta line is going to be our actual track, so it will be to the right of the centre line throughout the approach. And that's it, all matches and looks good. The missed approach is pretty complex, but basically to use RNAV, follow the points climbing to 4,000 feet. So the only thing we need to do is set the minimums, which as we agreed to was 810 feet. So we set that using Barrow. So remember with the PMDG you used to have to wait ages to do this, but on this you can just hold it down and it moves really quickly. Ship set it too far there. Good. 810 feet is set, and that's the map display. Now the only thing we need to do is calculate the landing performance. So we're arriving in Corfu with 3.5 tons. Our alternate, and apologies if you're Greek here, is it Thessaloniki? I think that's the way I pronounce it when I fly there. That's Thessaloniki, so it's quite a distance away, about 200 miles, so our reserves are 3 tons. So we've got 500 kilos of fuel to play with before we have to divert to an alternate. We have 4.4 tons on board, so we're going to burn, what's that, 900 kilos. Take 900 kilos off our current gross weight, that's going to be 60.4. So that's our landing weight, and we're going to use flat 40, and it'll be order break 3 to try and vacate at Bravo. And that's essentially it. That's how I set up and kind of brief the approach as well. So, once that's all done, we might as well get the descent checklist out of the way. So you can either use checklist here. You've got the descent checklist there. You've got all the guidance you need to do there if you're flying the mod for the first time. Or you could use the one on the control column, which is exactly how we do it in real life. So descent checklist, pressurization, land altitude is set. Well, the elevation I think is 6 feet in Corfu, so we've got 0 in the land out. What else we've got there? Anti-ice is off, approach free from fuel discussed, ice and out bugs. We've got the approach speed and minimums preset QNH. It's all checked and set, so descent checklist is complete. So let's have a look here. If I go to live, I can see everyone that's subscribed in the last few minutes, just to say thanks. So, oh Christ, loads of subscriptions. So thanks, Shinny Sue, That's That Joe, Tim Fraser, Mohammed Zardasht, David 5432, Infinite Flightman, and Ilya Paroli. Thank you very much for your subscriptions. Welcome to the channel. Alright, I see there's a few questions been coming in. We're a few minutes before the descent, all ready for the approach. If you have any questions about the approach into Corfu, feel free to send them my way. Hopefully you've got a copy of a Navigraph subscription so you can see the approach charts as well. Currently over the Ionian Sea. You can just about still see Sicily here. And a bit of cloud around. No bad weather for us. Good. Vladimir Debijak, thank you very much for the subscription. Welcome to my channel. Let's have a look at some of these questions there. Christ, there's so many coming in. I'll try and pick out some for you. Hey Yaffe, how much is the ZIBO mod? The ZIBO mod is completely free. ZIBO does take donations, which he thoroughly deserves because he's somehow created single-handedly with feedback, and there's obviously some other people working, probably the best freeway aircraft you could possibly get. I mean, for me, I can't believe it. Like, I've been telling people at work about it on the Type Rating. They've tried it out and they said, yeah, this is really good to use. Obviously, it's not finished yet, and it'll probably be a long time before it is, because there's so many little things that need to be programmed and working. But yeah, for what we're doing here is absolutely perfect. Pretty much match real world procedures. Stan Brunig, do you know the weather at the moment? I'm too lazy to look it up. Well, yes, the weather in Corfu. Don't worry, I'm not feeling so lazy. I can find out for you. Well, what we can use is the ACARS function of the FMC. So if we go to menu, ACARS, ATIS requests, we can type in the airport, Lima Golf Kilo Romeo's Corfu, press send. That sends a message, and hopefully we'll get us the ATIS back. We'll see how the weather is. It shouldn't be too bad based on the forecast conditions. Whilst that's going on, see if there's any other questions. Simon Stanton, have you ever been on the pier in front of runway 35? I haven't, but I've flown into Corfu quite a few times, and there's always so many people standing there. It looks pretty awesome, but no, if I ever take a break or a holiday there, I will go take some pictures. It looks pretty awesome. So, hopefully we'll have the ATIS. Yeah, we go ATIS, so let's have a look at the latest weather. So 1320 Zulu, it is about an hour old, but you can see here surface wind 270 at 15 knots, so that should be interesting. That's a 15 knot crosswind, and the mod's a little bit shaky on the crosswinds at the moment. The inputs are good, but the rudder and aileron input needs tweaking slightly, but it overall should be alright. We'll see how we get on. This means the visibility is more than 10 kilometres, a few clouds at 2,000 feet, temperature's 32, very hot, dew point's 24 degrees, and the QNH is 1014, which is pretty much as forecast. Now when we look at the dew point here, this is the temperature at which the air is fully saturated with moisture, and when the temperature and dew point is quite similar, you can anticipate or possibly expect fog and low visibility. So when they're quite close, something to be wary of. But at a temperature of 32 degrees and the fact it's not terribly humid in Corfu at the moment, it's very unlikely to be any fog there. It could be in the evening though, as the temperature decreases. Laura Moraine, you mentioned it's freeware. What's your thoughts on the complexity compared to the real machine and compared to the PMDG? So yeah, as I've said a few times, ZIBO mod, it's getting there. I think pretty much all the systems are correctly modelled, so the correct amount of fuel works, fuel burn, all of these systems work. So when you select the air conditioning systems, isolate systems, things like control wheel steering, it's very, very good. The flight dynamics are pretty much spot on, so the attitude and thrust settings we have for each phase of flight are identical to what we'd set in real life. But obviously it's still a lot of changes are made. You saw on, for example, on the takeoff, you might have missed it, it didn't quite behave correctly. That's something I'm sure ZIBO's probably already fixed now into the flight. So yeah, it was good. That's the great thing is it's got a lot of people behind it, and it's updated very frequently, so keep an eye out on the Explain forum, and it's very easy to reinstall. You just download the new version, reinstall it over the other one. There's a few good tutorials on how to do that. Ghostman SK, how do pilots send flight plans to ATC? Well, in a large airline like the one I work for, all the operational flight plans are made from a special department, literally called the flight planning department, and they send all that information. The flight plans are written months in advance. They'll then publish it to, I think it's Eurocontrol in Brussels, I'm not 100% sure, but it's nothing we have to do. We turn up in the crew room about an hour before departure. It's all we'll just have to print all the stuff off and then check it, and then we get to the aircraft. So I haven't had to file an operational flight plan since I did my instrument rating 6 years ago, 7 years ago now, so something I don't have to worry about. Good. So how long we got till top of descent now? Let's go on the cruise page. 37 miles, 26, so 6 minutes. So you do a PA now, probably. We always try and do a PA just prior to top of descent, so I always like to give them the same information. So So where we are, we're over the Ionian Sea, just to the southeast of Sicily, cruising at 32,000 feet. I always like to say the speed over the ground, because that's cool. 472 knots, around 550 miles an hour, travelling a mile about every 6 or seconds or so. And I always like to tell them what the outside air temperature is. So outside right now, minus 47 degrees. Then the rest of the routing, and all passengers ever want to hear is what time we're landing and what's the weather like. So we're landing at 14:48. 14:50, so in 30 minutes, and the weather is cracking. Alright, if the weather's bad, we don't tell them the weather's bad, we just say inclement, or there's showers in the vicinity. We don't ever, we're not all, we bend the truth slightly to always keep you happy. So that's it, PA's done. Yeah, we're just waiting for top of descent. And Mark O and Lloyd Mark Soyan, thank you very much for the subscription. Welcome to my channel. Excellent. So yeah, these are all just default X-Plane 11. That's why I love it. I've used FSX for years, and I started making my tutorials on my dilapidated laptop a year ago, 2 years ago. I didn't realise that you could get software like this. I mean, this is just out the box X-Plane 11. It's just fantastic. It just looks awesome. Just reminds me when I was flight simming. I was about in my teenage years. I used to plan flights based on real world like flight plans. I used to get an atlas out, decide to go there for the weekend and try and make it as realistic as possible, and just sharing what I used to do as a kid, really. Very fortunate to do what I do. If you could fly any commercial airliner, which would you choose? Well, I love the 737. But if I could have a go flying an aeroplane, I'd like to have a go on any Airbus. It always fascinates me how that thing works. I've flown a full motion Airbus simulator. A friend of mine who works at a European airline invited me, and it's very different to this. I mean, it's a bit instinctive, but that thing, I don't know, you never fully fly it. With a Boeing aircraft, you disconnect the autopilot or the throttle, and you are flying it. You have to trim it, you have to do all that. The Airbus, you fly it manually, but you hold the stick back, let go of the stick, and it holds your attitude. It all feels a bit artificial, but it is an incredibly sophisticated aircraft, and I think it's a nicer work environment. One thing you probably don't realise is that the 737 flight deck is pretty cramped, and it's really noisy. Actually, I don't know if you can see them here, but you see these little chevrons here. That's to disturb the noise, to make it a little bit quieter in the flight deck. Otherwise, I actually have a Bose noise cancelling headset to keep the nose down. But yeah, it would honestly be, I'd love to just have a go on a Airbus A320, just to have a fly around. Good. So approaching top of descent, should be a few more minutes yet. Julian Tech, thoughts on the Air Alaska crash? Yeah, that's an interesting one. Have you guys heard the ATC transcript from that? This fella is obviously having some problems. How the hell he managed to? Obviously, he has to have some sort of experience on operating that aircraft. I mean, if I jumped into a Dash Out, I probably wouldn't know how to start it. So, and then I saw the video of him being followed by an F-15. So yeah, well, interesting to see what comes out of that, how he managed to gain access. But imagine seeing that. Imagine being the taking off from Seattle. Interesting to read about. Antonio Rinaldi, what do you think about plane spotting? Yeah, I used to do that, and I used to go to all the air shows. I'm not as fascinated by it now. That's because this is what I do every day, but I'll tell you now, if I'm sat in the garden, an aeroplane flies over, I'll put down my book or my iPad or whatever I'm doing, I'll look up and watch it. So nothing wrong with that. It is good fun to go and watch the aircraft fly. I think you and I, everyone watching this, we all have the same passion. That's aviation. We always have, and we always will. So, reset MCP altitude. That's the time where we contact ATC, request descent. So, flight data sim, probably contacted Rome radar at the moment, request descent. And we'll go straight down to flight level 120, which is now set. 120 checked. Push out into vents. That will just initiate a descent at 1,000 feet per minute, and then we'll intercept the vertical profile. There we go, descent checklist complete, down we go. So flicking through here, some of the questions. crap, I missed the takeoff. Don't worry, this will be saved after the stream, as long as I don't have any critical massive problems, but should all be good. So, descending to 120, descent now. ZIBO's recently updated the mod, so the target speed, basically what I did, I went in the real aircraft, and level descent, punched all the cost indexes in, and I just recorded the speeds. In descent, the target speed, indicated airspeed, is the same regardless of any of the information. So cost index 30, that's going to give us initially Mach decimal 74, but on transition 273 knots, which it should be doing 273 knots now, so instead of the Mach number, so I'm not sure. It's probably because the thrust levers were up, but it should transition to 273 very soon. We'll just keep an eye on that. 757, we'll keep an eye on that, see how it works. So what I'm able to do, which is quite useful for ZIBO, is just I have no idea about how to do programming or editing things, but I've obviously got a bit of experience on this real aircraft. If it doesn't do something I'm expecting it, I'll just say ZIBO, it's meant to do this, give him the feedback, and I don't know how he does it. He fixes it within sometimes minutes. It's incredible, really. Yeah, that's a very, very special skill to be able to do that sort of stuff. There we go. So you can see how it's gone from Mach to indicated airspeed 273. We're going a few knots fast, but we'll just carefully monitor that. As we're going a bit more faster, there's a slight increase in parasitic drag, so that should slowly decrease the airspeed back to our target speed. You can just about maybe see it's slowly decreasing, so that's absolutely fine. We're just interested in following the VNAV vertical profile at this stage. Matthew Laslott, why does it seem like on the 737 MAX the overhead panel is still from the old 737 NGs and Classics? Why hasn't Boeing updated it? Well, that's because it is the same panel as the 737-800, so there is no changes. There might be some I'm unaware of. I've actually been in the MAX flight deck. We're going to be getting some at the airline I work for in the future, so mostly the features are something outside the scope. It's the bigger PFDs and NDs, newer engines, but essentially it is identical. There isn't going to be much difference. In fact, I think the course that we're going to do to fly onto the MAX, it's just going to be something we do on a PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll do some line flights on it, and off we go. Advantages for that, though, is the airline doesn't have to spend lots of money on retraining crew, and because it is Boeing 737 is such an iconic, it's absolute tank, this aircraft. It's so reliable. You know, it doesn't need to be changed. And there's that famous saying, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So yeah, it is. It looks like it's from the 50s. That's because it is from the 50s. But there's nothing wrong with this setup. So they've left it pretty much as it is. Excellent. So, Stan Broning, you just landed in Corfu now, letting you know it's fine. Thanks for the heads up. One day we'll do a live stream, and we'll do it where the weather forecast is really bad, just for a bit of fun, you know, see how we deal with it. We'll apply some adverse weather, fly operational, and see if I've got the skills to land in these conditions in a desktop simulator. It's flipping hard in real life, so it's going to be flipping hard in the ZIBO mod, because it accurately mimics all the external turbulence conditions really well. Excellent. So, passing flight level 200, speed slowly approaching our target speed, landing at 47, 29, so 18 minutes from now, all looking good. And we're still inbound to Italy. Actually, I completely forgot, look, my setup wasn't very good, I forgot to set the course. So courses, there's no requirement to do this on an RNAV approach because we're not using the external navigation aids, but it's just for situation awareness. Final approach track was 340, which I've now set, and I'm just showing the chart again. Gosh, I do need to get two monitors. Bring up the chart there. RNAV approach, you can see here 340 is the final approach track, and actually we'll tune this VOR. We're not using it for the arrival, but it's just useful to have as a backup. It's something we can navigate to, and actually the star is based off the Kikira VOR, so we should have it tuned anyway. So this 23-mile arc, as we fly on this arc, we should be exactly DME distance 23 miles away, so we'll definitely tune up 114.7 on the pedestal now. So 114.7, 4.7, and we should, yeah, we're in range, 55 miles away, and it's identified Kilo Romeo Kilo. Cool, so approaching 15 minutes to landing, seatbelt signs are on. Tim Fraser, has long-haul flight ever been attractive to you, or is doing shorter hops more demanding? I've always wanted to fly a wide-body jet, still kind of do, but I've trained a lot of people who have flown wide-body jets, and they tell me the novelty soon wears off, especially in this day and age where I don't know, it's not perhaps as glamorous as it used to be, and a lot of people do the long sectors, they have minimum rest, come back. Now, having said that, if someone said to me, flying a sim, do you want to do 5 years flying the jumbo and then go back to do what you're doing? I'll be like, yes please. But I really enjoy my current position and my operator as an instructor in the sim, and I wouldn't change it for anything. I really enjoy sharing what I'm passionate about. That's why I started my channel. Share it with you guys, share it with guys I'm training, just, you know, living and breathing what I love, so I cannot complain. Good, so a little bit cloudy. Very much doubtful we'll need engine anti-ice, because you can see it, 16,000 feet is already, you know, 9 degrees TAT. That's very, very warm. It's usually a lot colder than that. That's typical for a hot destination. Excellent. So we're up to 305 people watching. That's incredible. Better not screw this approach up. So 62 miles to run, times up by 3, should be around 18,000 feet, so around 15,000 feet, so a little bit lower. ZIBO's still working on the transition from the descent target speed to the approach speed, so you can see here Kilo Romeo 62, 250 knots, and then 185 knots below 5 miles, and that's absolutely impossible unless you've got an arrestor hook, so in time that will be programmed and working correctly. So you might see I have to modify VNAV slightly, or use a basic pitch mode to fix that. HD Simulation, thank you very much for the subscription, welcome to my channel. Excellent. Greece says, grease the landing, mates. I'll try my absolute best, but it is quite a short runway, so I probably will be aiming for perhaps a slightly firmer landing than usual. It's less than 2,000 meters landing distance, so yeah, I always get this. I uploaded a preview of the live stream yesterday on YouTube, and a few people asking, what was the feet per minute landing rate? I was like, what? How do you know? What? Honestly, guys, this feet per minute touchdown landing rate, something I never ever cared about. Right? Smooth landing is beautiful, it's lovely to pull off, but Boeing are very clear in this matter, and it says in a lot of the manuals, a smooth landing is not the criterion for a safe landing. So long as we're in the touchdown zone, and we obviously don't hammer it down and break the thing, that's all we're looking for. And there's actually certain conditions where we want to land very firmly, for example if the runway is contaminated or very short. So, imagine we've contacted Corfu radar, and they've cleared us now to descend, let's say, what's the initial restriction into Corfu? I'll just have to get the chart up here. Bear with me, guys. So you can see here it's 6,000 feet, so we'll imagine we can clear to the altitude of 6,000 feet. So, we're back here, 6,000 feet is now set, and the QNH is 1014. So passing 11,800 for 6,000 feet, and the standby altimeter is, oops, lazy, pressing the wrong button, is set 1014. So you can see the aircraft is now descending from, it's pitching from 11,400 to 6,000 feet, but the target speed has now gone to 250 knots because we're approaching the restriction at flight level 100, so we'll see how that behaves. We might use speed brake just to ensure that we never get any higher than 250 knots then. Good. So this is where the workload increases as we get closer and closer to the airfield. You know, I'm going to get all these little subscription buzzers on the approach, but never mind. Rasmus Jensen, Seti Shu, Carlos Zimbardo, thank you very much for the subscription. Welcome to Flight Deck to Sim. Cool, so approaching 10,000 feet, just doing a little bit faster, so I'm just going to go a little bit of speed brake just to get the speed below 250 knots, because I want to kind of leave it in VNAV. Excellent. Speed brake, just like in a real aeroplane, not terribly useful, especially at low speed. Just brings a little bit more drag, but that's pretty much what kind of deceleration rate you get there. Right, there's around 250 knots. We can now do the post-cruise check, so put the fixed landing light, turn off lights on, pressurization is set, seatbelts on, recall, and I forgot to set the angular bank back to, well, I never set it to 10 degrees, I should have set it to 10 degrees, but back to 25 degrees. And the post-cruise checks are complete. Lino 1988, what do you use for fuel calculations for this ZIBO? I have a profile for the PMDG and it works fine, but it doesn't work fine for ZIBO. Well, I'm using the Simbrief format for a 737-800 and it's working absolutely fine for me, so you might want to just check how that's working there. So we're now on the arrival and we're just intercepting the 23-mile arc on the Star. The aircraft just went to FMC speed because the target speed was dropping, but it's gone back to ARM now as we're doing 250 knots. And again, if I bring up the chart on the Star, I'll show you exactly where we are, because unfortunately this chart isn't supported. We are just here on this 23-mile arc, and we can now descend to 4,000 feet. So 23-mile arc and descending to 4,000 feet. And to show you how good the ZIBO mod has come, look at that DME distance, 23 miles. Alright, now I hope we do get the curved magenta lines at some point, but if you look at this trend vector, see how it's curved? The aircraft does correctly fly it, and you can see how, look, it's just in a constant right turn, so we're on that arc really nicely. This is quite a challenging element of the instrument rating to hand fly when you're in a light aircraft. As soon as the DME changes, you have to make a slight change in your heading input to get it to decrease whilst flying the arc, and the closer in you are, the more sensitive it is. But I haven't done any manually flown DME arcs for a few years now. It's the beauty of having a 737-800 available, but if I was to disconnect, turn the flight directors off, I think I'd have a rough idea what I need to do. SMC T12, you can mute the notifications in Streamlabs settings. Yeah, I can do that, and that's actually a really good idea on the approach, so I don't get any of those dings. Let's see if I can remember how to do that. I've just turned it off, I think, so we'll see what happens. Good, so on the arc nicely. All flying well. We've now intercepted the radial to turn inbound to Kilo Romeo 602. Back to FMC speeds. It's just, so at the moment it should only go to FMC speed when you're 15 knots below your target speed. At the moment it's doing it quite quickly. It's something I've already mentioned to ZIBO, but as long as it's flying the correct target speed, that's all we'd like to do. And there we go. There is Corfu straight ahead out the window. Good. So we'll leave 4,000 feet set until we're approaching BedX. And actually, if I bring up the RNAV chart now, we should be... Ah, there we are, we're on it, so I'll bring the charts up for you guys. There we go, you can see we're inbound to BedX, descending to 4,000 feet, and then we're going to go Kilo Romeo 602, 2,900 feet, and then we'll intercept 340. So we'll bring this up a few times on the approach, so you can follow us down as we go. Right, let's do the approach checklist. So frequencies, we've got the Kilo Romeo Kilo VOR tuned, but we're not using it for the approaches. It's RNAV. Fixed rings we have set for runway 35, and the instruments and idents. Well, as I said, there's no navigation LEDs, so there's nothing we need to identify, but we do have the VOR tuned. Standby instruments are set, and the courses of 340. And then we just read the approach checklist on the control column, which is altimeter's instruments set and cross-checked, and the approach aids checked and set. And the approach checklist is complete. So yeah, at the moment the mod's getting very low. We shouldn't be this low yet. We're 23 miles away. We should be at around 6,900, and we're at 4,700. So this is just to do with the mods still working on the descent and arrival platform. So I might use vertical speed shortly. Now, less than 1 mile to BedX, so we can now go to the next cleared altitude, which is 2,900 feet, which is now set. And we might just go to vertical speed in a few minutes just to ensure that we get a continuous descent. Yeah, we'll do that now. So I'm just going to go vertical speed, set about 800 feet per minute, and I'm actually going to bug the approach speed It's just that the mod is still a little bit late at doing all these sort of things at the moment, but it will get improved on. You could use VNAV, but you just level off at 2,900 feet first, and then it would start descending again. But if we try and avoid leveling off at most approaches, and a lot of busy international airports, they monitor for CDA compliance to ensure that you don't level off. Good, so VNAV might show us getting high, but we're actually not going to be getting high. So long as we pass 2,900 feet roughly at Kilo Romeo 601, we should be good. So you're going to really shallow off that descent now, just so we can start slowing down, because we're approaching 10 miles, we need to select flap 1. Temperature's 32 degrees, so I definitely don't need engine anti-ice on. It's just going through the clouds. And as we approach the up speed, we can select flap 1, which I'm going to do now, and just bug the flap 1 speed. That's really realistic. So I see a set vertical speed, but with the flaps there's a ballooning, so the rate of climb increases slightly. That's just what happens in the real aircraft. That's really realistic. That's good to see. So speed's looking good. This is showing us high, but we're not. That's just the vertical profile coming from under the bottom of the cloud now. There's Corfu. Really shallowing the descent, and you can already see, look, here's the crosswind I'm going to have to contend with. This will be interesting, but if we're unstable, we'll fly the missed approach just as we would do in real life. Right, let's go to flap 5, gonna match the speed. Don't want to be doing much more than 180 knots on base leg. And there we go, we're now turning final. You can see that the VNAV profile's coming back alive, so it is going to be correct. We can now descend to 1,700 feet. Which is the next cleared step altitude, and I'm just getting ready to re-engage VNAV as soon as we intercept it. Set the final approach track, 340. All looking good. And you can see why you don't want to be any lower. There's a lot of terrain out the window there. Cool. So here comes VNAV coming back onto profile. We haven't leveled off. Flap 5 speeds, that's the terrain noted on the ND. We'd usually select terrain there, and we can now select VNAV, open the speed window, and now the FMC's exactly following the vertical profile as we descend there. So I'm just going to push out into vent just to ensure that we are descending. There we go.
2,500.
And you can just about see, whoops, there's the runway. Alright, so you can see how it's offset there. If it was straight in, you get too close to the mountains here on the left hand side. Excellent, so we're now getting to the point. If I just bring up the chart again very briefly, you can see we are established nicely, and we're just going to descend to now the next cleared altitude, passing the final approach point here. So concentrate on that, and we can now set this rounded up to nearest 100 feet, so 900 feet. Where I've got VNAV, and the speed window is open. So I will endeavour to look at some of the questions after touchdown, but at the moment I'd like to concentrate on this. I've lost the distance there, but we're going to configure a little bit early just to get stabilised. It's approaching 4 miles, so gear down, flat 15, match the speed. We'll imagine being clear to land. So start switches are in continuous, recall is checked, speed brakes arm green lights, landing gears down 3 green, order brake is 3 set, holding on the landing flaps, which we'll select now. We can go straight to flap 40 because we're at less than 162 knots. Match the final approach speed. We've got a bit of a crosswind here, but the headwind's less than 10 knots. There we go, so landing flaps selected. I'm just going to override the thrust lever to ensure that order throttle's working correctly. So flaps, we're planning for 40, we've got 40, and green light shows the leading edge flaps have extended. Landing lights on, we have been cleared to land. Surface wind in Corfu right now, 260 at 14 knots. So, top of the white bar, set the missed approach altitude, that's 4,000 feet. That's now set. Approach logic, so the aircraft doesn't level off when you do that. And let's do some hand flying, let's see how we get on. Wish me luck. Alright, disconnect autopilot order throttle. I'm going to turn the flight directors off. And It's approaching minimums now, so if it was low visibility at 810 feet,
minimums.
if we didn't see the runway, we'd have to go around. So I'm just going to take a little left turn to get back onto the extended centre line.
Minimums.
And we can continue because we see the runway. Speed's getting a little bit low, so just going to add a bit more thrust. I can see 2 reds, 2 whites just about, start descending a little bit more now. Speed's back under control, so reduce the thrust. So we've just got to be aware of this crosswind here because it's from the left here, so you just got to point the aircraft to ensure
500.
that you don't drift from the centre line. Top of the 500 foot amber bar, we are stabilised, safe to continue. Speed's good,
400.
descent profile's okay. Just going to have to use a little bit of right rudder during the flare and a little bit of aileron into wind. Back onto 2 reds, 2 whites. Speed's good. You can see the drift.
200.
Over the thresholds.
100.
On the sense line, looking okay.
50. 40. 30.
Check.
20.
Close. A
10.
little bit of right rudder onto the centre line. Keep the wings level. A little bit firm, but I'll take that. Aileron into wind after touchdown so the wings don't drop. So speed brakes up. Reverses. See the wing look wanted to go to the right. That's because of the crosswind.
80 knots.
80 knots. There we go. Idle reverse. A little bit fast for this exit perhaps. Ooh, brake, brake, brake. Just about made it. The brakes would be very, very hot though after that one. I probably should have gone to the end. So, that was it. That was a 50 knot crosswind landing. Not too bad. We'll look at the replay later. So, vacating at Bravo. Straight away start the APU because it's going to be a very short taxi. And just turn the, hopefully not for the end of the runway. And the strobes to steady. I've just brought it to a stop so I know I don't go off the grass. Good. So speed brake up, water brake to off. Flaps we've retracted. Check the hydraulics. Flight director off. 100 here. And we're just going to park on stand 5, which is where we did the tutorial from the start of the other day. Start switches to off, and probes as well. Whoops, this is not easy on your own, is it? This would usually be done by the first officer as the captain taxi is in, but no problem. Alright, so stand 5 here. It's all self-positioning stands in Corfu, so there's no pushback crew here at all. Excellent. And I can't believe it. The streaming software didn't crash once. Unbelievable. So this Streamlabs is a lot better than the OBS studio I was using before, and it's got all those cool little features on it too, which is useful. There we go. Here's stand 5. You'd usually have a marshal there to taxi you onto stand. And this looks familiar because this is exactly where I did my cold and dark to engine start tutorial. Bring it to a stop. Set the parking brake. AB should be available, which it is on the bus, and we can now shut the engines down. 2 blues, 1 red. Engines dead. Cabin crew disarm slides, open doors. Let's open the flight deck door so if any passengers can stare inside and go ooh. And just do the transit shutdown flow, which is this. Turn the voice recorder on. Transponder. Standby. Oops. 2000. There we go. And N2, check below 20%, which it is. Anti-collision light 2 off, and that's it. We would then do the transit shutdown checklist, and here we are. There's the engine spooled out in Corfu in one piece, mind. Oop, I always forget to do this when I'm in the desktop simulator. Don't forget to turn off the turn off and taxi lights, and there we go. Stairs will be retracted now. They bring the stairs to the front of the aircraft. Passengers will already be standing ready to get off the aircraft. Awesome. So actually, should we have a look at the replay of the landing, because that's an awesome feature of X-Plane 11. Toggle replay mode. Oh, that's good time. Look at that. Let's do it from there. And if we do it from this view, we should see how it's on. Let the aircraft fly past. closer actually. I think there's a better view, isn't it? Oh yeah, is it shift? I'm trying to remember the controls for the replay here. It's a tower view. I'm trying to get the one which is over the landing runway. There we go. That's the one I was looking for. Sorry about that. So here we are. You can see the crosswind, a little bit of crab. Looking nice. All under control. It's a really powerful feature, this replay feature. So you see a little bit of crosswind. Sounds good. See how firm it was. There's the rudder in now. Yeah, I'll take that. You can see how, look at the aircraft drifting to the right. That's what happens with a crosswind. The aircraft then crabs into wind. You just then have to use rudder, and it looks a lot more dramatic from the outside view, but it is all under control. So that's how that works. Cool, we'll end the replay there. Go back in the flight deck. And someone did say turn the weather radar off. Very good idea, otherwise everyone's going to be growing extra legs and limbs from the x-rays. Right, just before I sign off, I'll try and answer some of the questions you were having. Stand 5, right, nailed it, thank you very much. Good, thanks for the comments on the landing, that was okay, thank you very much, nice landing, good. Any other questions here? Stand 5. Murphy, how do you use the tiller and X-plane? Well, I don't use the tiller, I'm just using the rudder pedals, and it's linked with the tiller under the control settings, so it's just easier to use it that way. Obviously we don't use the rudder in real life. Do another. I will do another live stream, but I've got some things to do at home. But I was thinking of doing this as a 2-sector to do the return sector. I just don't have time today. But one day, when everyone's out of the house, I will do a good 4 or 5 hour session. We'll do 2 sectors. It'll be a good laugh. Replay function is cool. That's great. For the next stream, please could you record your mouse cursor? Yes, sorry. I thought I had those settings on, so I'm not sure why you couldn't see that. Sorry about that. I'll make sure that happens on the next one. Okay, wanted to love you too. Very good, thank you. You're a master. Hardly. I'm just doing what I practice. Practicing what I preach. You know. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for tuning in and watching that live. I hope you found that interesting and perhaps learned something new. Next will be another tutorial. If you want a specific tutorial, I get a lot of requests and stuff. I keep saying I'll do a poll on the YouTube community tab to ask what people want, which I will do. I think what we'll do as a tutorial is this approach into Corfu, but the circling approach, because that's a really challenging approach and a good one to practice. Hopefully, based on what I show you, you can practice doing that. I thoroughly recommend the ZIBO mod, because every time I stream, people keep asking, is it good? It is very, very good. It's what I certainly use as a reference for my training now, and it is continuously getting better. Anyway, I hope you found it enjoyable. If you haven't done so already, really appreciate the thumbs up and punch that subscription button to stay tuned with more content. And if you haven't done so already, you can find me on Instagram, where I often put stories from the real aircraft and the real sim and real life pictures, answering technical questions as well. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you in another tutorial very soon. All the best. Bye bye.